Want something scary? Try going into a lesson, a clinic you're leading, or even a teaching assessment with zero plan on what you're going to teach that day. But you know what? Most of the best instructors and clinicians you meet do exactly that. They don't make a single decision on lesson content until they, 1, see their students ski to identify their individual needs, and 2, compare those needs against their students' individual goals. Because if you have a plan formulated before you ever even see your students ski, you're not really teaching, you're presenting. Relinquishing that control of coming in with a plan can be scary, but in this Tech Talk, Quinn Ferguson shares his process to help build trust in yourself to give up that control and help teach more engaging, student-centered lessons. As Quinn shows us, when you show up to the lesson with the right teaching processes and focuses, the lesson content can practically plan itself. In addition to being a member of the PSI Eastern Region's Alpine development team, Quinn is also a mental performance consultant, and I think you'll find that background in sports and performance psychology really shines through wonderfully in his content. Please enjoy this episode of Okemo Tech Talks, brought to you by the Okemo Ski Ride School.
So, without further ado, I'd like to share something with all of you. This is my boy, Carl Jung. And here's my psychology for you all. Carl's an OG psychologist, one of the fathers of psychoanalysis. And he has this really, really awesome quote. As to the methods, there may be a million and some, but principles are few. The person who grasps principles can successfully select his or her own methods. The person who tries methods, ignoring principles, is sure to have trouble. And he's talking about, psychological principles and methods to teaching psychoanalysis here. But this quote obviously rings true for any context. And in the ski world, right, I want us to think about the principles in this quote as our fundamentals, right? So the stronger your grasp is on the technical fundamentals and the teaching fundamentals and the people skills fundamentals, the easier those methods become, right? You can easily choose how you want to teach something and how you want to go about it when you really know what the fundamental is. And, I think it's important to say that wherever you are in your instructor journey, a lot of people first learn by copy and paste, right? So, if you go to like a level 1 exam, you'll find that a lot of people are teaching something that they've been taught from someone else, right? And they just kind of regurgitate it all, right? That's really natural. It's pretty common for us to watch what people do, take that as a start, and then kind of make it our own as we go. And so it's not to say that like this process of learning how to be an instructor doesn't involve like learning the methods first, right? But hopefully tonight you all can see how important it is for you to really know your fundamentals so that like the methods that you do know and the methods that you haven't discovered yet will become a lot easier for you to grab. And also we're going to definitely be doing some method sharing tonight, some activity sharing, which would be fun. So hopefully some of you will walk out of here today with a new activity that you didn't know coming into the webinar. But keep this quote in mind. And also, if you don't know who Carl Jung is, go look him up because he's a pretty cool dude for sure. So, but this is not a psychology webinar, so I will stop the nerding out there. Okay, so and here I go. Trust the process, Brandon. That's more psychology for you, right? So said I was, and I can't help myself, man. I'm sorry. I can only be Quinn. Don't know how to be anyone else. So what I want to talk about is my process, how I go through things. And hopefully you all share a similar process because I think my process is nothing extraordinary or different from, I think, how we at the PSIA want to be able to go through a lesson. So this is how we start, right? You have a group of students, and the first thing you need to do, besides like learning their names and figuring out what their goals are for the day, okay, is watch them ski. so you know what's going on, right? So we have some movement analysis that we start with. And ideally, with movement analysis, we come away with a cause and effect, or an SBI statement. SBI is situation, behavior, impact. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't actually write that out in full. So if people need, maybe Brandon, you can like put that in the chat real quick, just so people know. But SBI, cause and effect, it's the same thing, right? SBI, a situation. So what's going on the hill? Like, where is it happening, right? Where in the turn? The behavior, which is like the movement, and of course the impact, which is like what's it doing to the ski or the snowboard, for any snowboarders who are potentially here tonight, or whatever your plank of choice is. This stuff applies. All of this stuff tonight applies no matter your discipline. So if you're not a skier, cool, doesn't matter, because this is still really relevant. Or yeah, a cause and effect statement, right? So like, what's the body doing that impacts the equipment, right? And when is it happening, right? What's the situation? What's going on? Really, really, really simple. SBI is also like a really fantastic way to give feedback, and maybe Katie will talk about that in 2 weeks when she has her webinar. I don't know, but so we want to start with that, right? Simplify it for yourself. When you do movement analysis, give yourself a cause and effect statement in your own head of what's going on before you even give the feedback to your students, so that it's really crystal clear in your head, right? Being specific is such an awesome tool when you want to make sure that your focus is right. And as an instructor, you are leading the group. You are leading everyone else's focus. So when you do these things correctly, the group is going to follow you. If you don't have a clear plan, the group is going to be aimless, right? So be specific with yourself. It'll translate to your students. So like when I'm watching people come down the hill, I'm giving SBI statements in my own head, right? Little cause and effect statements. Like, that's what's going on with the ski, and that movement is causing that, right? And it affects this. I do that up here. And then of course I can share that with my students when I'm giving feedback too, right? And then of course there comes this question of, okay, I saw that, and then what am I going to do to fix it? How am I going to help my, how am I going to help my students, get from their current movement pattern to a new movement pattern, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like all we're doing is we're teaching movement, right? How to fix it, right? Technical fundamentals equals ski performance plus body. If you read the technical fundamentals, regardless of your discipline, you will find that there is something in there about the equipment and making the equipment do something, a skill with the equipment, and body parts, or something that the body does in order to affect the equipment. It's pretty cool, right? And I'd encourage you all to like go back and look at the formal language of the fundamentals. They all have that, right? It's like, okay, control the rotation of the ski by turning the legs separate from the upper body, right? So then it's like, okay, if I'm going to turn the ski, I'm going to do that with my legs separate from my upper body, right? Body part, ski performance, right? Control the edging of the ski through a combination of inclination and angulation, right? You can tip and bend all over the body. That one's a little bit more broad. It's not specific body parts, right? But nonetheless, it's still body ski, right? Or body board, or body, I don't know what, outrigger, Brandon, is that fair in adaptive world? Yeah, not in the head. Yeah, for fun. Yeah. So knowing those 5 technical fundamentals, or 6 if you're a snowboarder, that's going to be really, 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 really important. And that's why there's such a big emphasis on making sure you can connect the fundamentals to what you're seeing on the hill. Everyone here, I'm sure, has gone through an assessment process before, right? Like, how have you been on the side of the hill doing movement analysis? Examiner comes up to you, right? You want to be able to give them a cause and effect, but you also want to be able to relate it to a fundamental, right? You got to be able to make that connection, because if you want to fix it, you're going to need that knowledge base to be able to teach effectively, right? You can't teach if you don't know what you're teaching. So know those. That's really, really, really important. Once primary fundamental is identified, and how I like to think of this is the cause as opposed to the symptoms, right? So like when I watch skiing and I'm watching and I'm doing movement analysis, skiing is a pretty integrated thing in terms of the fundamentals. They're all present, right? So how do I figure out which one is the primary one that I need to manage, right? Well, for an example, I'll give you an example. Let's say I watch a skier enter the belly of the turn and their skis begin to diverge from each other, right? The symptom there is a loss of, or what I'm seeing is a loss of outside ski pressure, right? So the fundamental, right, you say is control pressure from ski to ski by directing pressure to the outside ski, right? But that didn't happen on its own. Something happened earlier in the turn in order to cause that. So what I've seen is a symptom, and can I then look and find out what the cause is and figure out what that primary fundamental is in order to fix what I saw in the middle of the turn, right? So once I've identified the primary fundamental, okay, I can move on to figuring out how I want to fix it, because now I know what the root problem is, what the issue is with this person or with the group. Shouldn't say issue, but the point of improvement. Let's call it that. So this is how I think about activities, and I'm really fortunate to have made the dev team last year because I'm getting all these resources and ways about thinking about skiing and watching skiing. And so I'm going to share something with all of you that has been really impactful for me when I do movement analysis, and also when I do when I go through this process of picking an activity based on what I saw and then sharing that with the group, which is I split activities up into these 3 categories. And some of you might know these categories because they're on your scorecard. This is how examiners will score your skiing, right? They have these 3 different activities: integrated, individual, and versatility. And what I found is that these activities really help me kind of compartmentalize different activities and make them more purposeful. So it makes it easier for, it's like, okay, if I want to test, let's say I watch a skier and they are crushing a medium radius turn, and I watched their turns. I was like, wow, that was really, really good. I didn't really see anything that I would want to change, right? Well, maybe what I would want to do is pick an activity that has to do with versatility, because I want to see if they can keep that in different situations, right? So then I have a list of activities in my head that are all versatility based, which helps me get to picking the right activity. But yeah, so I think about it this way: integrated, individual, versatility. And I can give you guys some examples. So like integrated activities, well, basic parallel, right? That's an integrated activity. Wedge turns, that's an integrated activity. Wedge Christie, that's an integrated activity. You look at like individual activities, you're thinking about let's see, how about a traverse across the hill with a side slip, right? That's a individual activity that highlights edging skills, right? Or pivot slips, right? It shows rotary. I'm sure all of you have ideas. Or like maybe shuffle turns for center mass over base of support, right? Outside ski turn, right? Those are all highlighted activities that show one fundamental that you're really trying to pick out. And then, of course, versatility is going to be stuff that shows turn shape, size, and line. So if you ski a funnel, that's versatility. If you ski lane changes, versatility, right? If I ask you to ski 5 skidded open parallel turns and then 5 more carved parallel turns, that's versatility. So being able to break up activities into those 3 categories, I think really helps to stop, like to kind of just begin to figure out where you want to go, right? Because it's like, what are you actually trying to teach? Do you want to highlight a fundamental, right? Do you want to have it be more skiing based and have it be integrated, keep the group moving? Or do you want to test maybe a really good group of skiers and see where those skills get limited? Cool. So there are going to be some other things, obviously, are going to help you begin to narrow down the activities, the conditions, group dynamics, and individual goals. So if I get out on the hill and I've got like a foot and a half of fresh powder, right? Which I know some of you may be laughing because like when do we get that in the East? But there's been a couple of really good days this year like that. Obviously the conditions of the day are going to like help impact like what you can do, right? You're not going to get a foot and a half of powder and then like have people be doing static simple complex on the side of the hill all day, right? Or like going and doing pivot slips or something like that. You want to go out and ski that kind of stuff. So you're going to want to probably pick activities that are more in the integrated zone or in the versatility zone, right? The snow alone on that day would challenge versatility, right? So how about this? If any of you have ever been in like a level 2 or a level 3 exam, you ski bumps at some point, right? Skiing bumps is testing your versatility, right? Variable terrain. If you get out there and it's like super, super foggy, the mountain's socked in and you don't have really good visibility, right? That's probably going to impact what activities you're going to decide to teach to the group. Because first of all, if you pick an activity where you're all moving apart from each other, you might not even see each other past a certain point, right? But also the lack of vision that your students are going to have because of the conditions, you're going to want to teach something that keeps them in a more comfortable zone, right? So conditions are something to consider, of course, right? Group dynamics, right? What does your group want to do? This is like, what are their goals, right? But also, what kind of skiers or riders do you have? Do you have someone who's out there on their first day on snow for the season? Do you have someone who maybe is coming back from an injury and like wants to take it a little bit more easy? Do you have someone who like really wants to get pushed and ski hard? Those are all things that will help you figure out whether or not you want to be doing an activity that is more closely related to just skiing, right? It's maybe more integrated or versatile, or doing something that's a little bit more individualized that you can like really break down a certain movement and take a little bit more time on the side of the hill to do those activities. I find, Brandon, I don't know what you think, but I find that a lot of the individual activities are usually, you can obviously always keep the group moving, but like there's naturally going to be a little bit more start and stop with them because it's not just skiing, right? You're doing activity, coming to a stop.
Yeah, like it's really hard in real skiing to isolate a single fundamental. And so typically when you're challenging an individual fundamental or just trying to highlight that, it kind of requires stripping away what makes up real skiing, right? Like you have to like a single ski straight run, for example, right? You're not turning, you're just going straight on one ski to emphasize, say, something like forward and aft balance. Or like you said, your earlier example, like just tipping a ski on the edge of the traverse and off the edge just to highlight edging, for example. So it's like, it's very hard to like ski using only one fundamental at a time. That's why we have 5 of them that define what makes up good skiing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And I think like when you consider about what activities you want to do, right? If let's say I've got like a super cold day, it's like 2 degrees out, and I start picking individual activities, like really like something like a traverse across the mountain with a side slip. The group's not going to be moving a lot while I'm doing that activity, right? And it's like, wow, I want to keep people warm and I want to keep people moving. And maybe I want to make sure that they're getting on the gondola or like the bubble chair or something that keeps them warm. So I want to make sure we're skiing a lot. So maybe I want to pick an activity that keeps the group going that way, right? These are all decisions that like I'm making that haven't actually gotten me to picking the activity yet. It's almost like this big process of elimination as I'm going through this process. And that's kind of, I think, Brandon, when you wrote the description for this webinar, You said it's like the activity practically picks itself, right? And if you guys have noticed as I'm going through all this, like all of these things help narrow it down to all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, you know what? I figured out that I need to do a versatility activity. I have the conditions for it. I know this group wants to ski and is a good group and wants to get tested on where their limits are. Like, great. Now I know like generally where I need to be looking, right? Just by process of elimination alone. So I hope like some of you are kind of understanding that and forming that. So once you decide to pick that activity, whether it's in integrated, individual, versatile, or whatever it is, okay, what you really want to be able to do is hone in on a certain sensation, right? I said this earlier, but we teach movement, and movement inherently involves sensations that you feel, right? And skiing is a sport that involves force, right? You're going to feel that against your body. You're going to feel forces at play. You're going to feel the movements that you're trying to enact on your equipment. That stuff is really, really, really important to think about. Is what sensation do you want your group to key in on? And as an instructor, it's really important that you have a desired sensation that you're trying to lead the group towards or trying to highlight for the group, right? And I always make sure that when I'm starting a lesson, I'm picking that first activity, it's like I have a sensation in mind that I want all of you to feel. You all might feel it differently. You might describe it differently. You might learn it differently, right? Of course you will. We have all heard the visual, auditory, kinesthetic learners, right? Different learning styles, people that need to do things, people that need to watch things, right? So I'm going to make sure as we're going through that first activity that like I am giving my students as many opportunities to be able to get to that sensation, right? And they might not need a lot, but I'm gonna exhaust all of my little tricks to make sure that every single one of my students has that sensation. And we're gonna reflect and talk about it and make sure that there's an understanding of what that sensation is before I go anywhere else. You could spend a whole day trying to get that sensation. And if you do, I bet it's a pretty valuable lesson. You might get it within the first 30 minutes with your group or the first hour with your group, right? Who knows? Ideally, sometimes in the exam, you got to get it within the first like 5 to 10 minutes because you got to be able to keep moving along. But ideally, you want to really be able to lock in that sensation. And when you eventually coach the group to that sensation, right, then you can think about progressing the lesson and moving on. And someone might hear that and say, well, can I progress the lesson in that first activity in order to get to the sensation? Yes, of course you can. But when I mean progress the lesson, I mean, once the sensation is down, then they can begin to learn and figure out how to be able to use that sensation. But we'll get to that in a few. First, Brandon, I'm going to need you now is we are going to go into some breakout groups.
There we go. All right, I'm going to hop in here with my editor hat on so I can edit out all of the setup discussions for the group activity that the live participants got to participate in. And so I just want to give you the context of the discussions that are about to follow my brief interruption here. And so the live participants were divided into 5 breakout rooms, each assigned one of the 5 fundamentals. And they were tasked with developing a list of teaching activities that highlighted that one fundamental, right? But more specifically, they were tasked with coming up with a list of activities across 3 categories: individual, integrated, and versatility. And to be clear here, individual activities, for the most part, are those that isolate the application of one skill or fundamental, whereas integrated activities are those that may be used to highlight or focus on a fundamental, but require a competent application of 2 or more fundamentals to perform them successfully. And then there's versatility activities, which are those that challenge you at just that, right? Your versatility with your application of one or more fundamentals, right? Can you do it quickly or can you draw it out and do it slowly? Can you do a lot of that movement or can you maybe be a little bit more subtle about it? Can you do it on groomers and then also be able to do it in more variable terrain, right? Like varying the dirt, the duration, intensity, the rate, and timing of movements is often kind of the name of the game when it comes to versatility activities. And so, without further ado, here are the discussions that followed after everyone returned from their breakout rooms.
I'll jump in for Team Rotary. All right. So on the individual side of things, we had bow ties, simple wedge turns, and even something as simple as just walking in a circle and looking at how your feet rotate throughout the arc of the turn. For integrated, we had pivot slips, hockey stops, wedge Christie, basic parallel.
Okay, would you say a pivot slip is an integrated activity, or would you think it's an individual activity?
I personally would think it's integrated because of how heavily dependent it is on 4F management.
Okay, so that's a great discussion for this group. So a pivot slip is a individual activity, right?
I would argue that to the death.
Yeah, sure. But if Carrie Reed was on this conversation right now, I think she would chop off our heads if I said it wasn't. So it's an individual activity formally, but know that you can always, the skiing fundamentals, right? The definition of fundamental is it's fundamental to what you're doing. So if you've got a ski on, right, and you're doing something, you're going to be able to find a fundament. You're going to be able to find all 5 fundamentals somewhere in there. Right. Remember that individual or highlighted, right? However you want to classify that, it's showing one specifically, right? So if you're teaching a pivot slip, you got to know that the primary fundamental there is legs steering separate from the upper body. Can you teach fore aft in that? Of course you can. Is fore aft incredibly important to do one? Yes, because otherwise you won't stay in the corridor, right? You could teach leg length change in that. You could teach lots of different things, right? Foot to foot, right? There's lots of ways you could go, but for the sake of classification here, that would be a individual, activity. And if you want to talk off camera when I'm not recording, it'll be on YouTube. I'm happy to be a little bit more explorative about that with you, Brian. But for sake of formality, that would be an individual activity. But otherwise, fair play. I like it. What else do we have?
Okay. For versatile, we had bumps.
Yeah.
One skiing, short radius turns, pain in the S, skate to shape, and hop turns.
Cool. I love it. Nice. How about another group?
I could talk about forehand.
All right, Brian, what we got?
Other Brian, yeah. So if they're individual, we started with just static, jumping straight up and down, and making sure they can lift the ski parallel with the ground. If they're leaning too far forward or too far back, then the tips or tails are going to come up. From there, we can go into a more dynamic activity like falling leaves, where we're playing with the forehand balance while we're sliding down the hill. What else do we have? Whirly birds is more of an integrated activity because it's involving rotation, it's involving avoiding edging. And then for versatility, I mean, we can take any of these. Oh, we had also storm turns was for integrated. On the straight runs of it, we were kind of feeling that was more of an individual.
Yeah.
But then as we get into the turn portion of it, we're thinking that gets more into the edging and the rotation and the ski pressure and stuff. So that, well, no, not ski, well, even a little, we felt it was integrated, but I'm not sure that's right now.
Definitely.
Hearing your other explanation. Okay. And then for versatility, we can either, any of these activities, we can alter the intensity of them, we can alter the turn radius is up, and we alter the pitch, the terrain, anything to make it more versatile activity.
Cool. Awesome. Hell yeah. What else? Next group.
Edging. Let's see. Edging skills. So I apologize. I did get pulled away a little bit and I missed on the integrated versus individual versatility. So I'll do my best here. But in regards to edging, we started off talking about side slips, railroad tracks, garlands, whirly birds, climbing uphill with a group and seeing who could go the highest, the fastest, a little bit of a race. And then doing a side slip downhill and trying to erase those lines just to get comfortable with raising and lowering those edges.
Yeah.
One skiing activity. Are you matching your, where are you matching your skis? So ask the students, where are you matching your skis? And at that point, try to transition them onto their edges. Showing your bottoms. So as you're turning, you're trying to show off the bottoms of your skis. Hockey stops. And this is where, let's see, would it be versatility? We're doing a J turn to turn into a hockey stop. Your rotation is mixing in. Is that versatility? I'm just looking at I apologize. I missed your little part there. We're discussing a different or integrated possibly.
Yeah. No,
your rotation and right. Falling leaf.
Yes. Yeah, I think the conversation before and what I'll add to it now is like those categories, right? An integrated activity is going to be showing multiple fundamentals in terms of what it's like trying to do. A highlighted activity still have multiple fundamentals involved, but it's showing one in particular. It's like, if you think about the fundamentals as a blend of different, amounts, right? An individual or highlighted activity will have one fundamental be definitely higher than the rest in order to show that. An integrated one might have some more balanced, right? Would you buy that, Brandon? Take that one home?
Yeah.
So maybe that's another way to think about it too. So what, we've done edging, fore aft rotation. Who's next?
Well, we're foot to foot.
Foot to foot. All right. What do you got?
We didn't like that one very much.
You didn't like
we did like stork turns for individual.
Yeah. Okay.
J turns.
J turn for individual foot to foot.
Yeah, we talked about that for.
Okay.
And skating for integrated.
Skating. Cool. Okay, I like that a lot for integrated. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And then Brandon came in with us to talk about kind of like the versatility part of that one, and varying the terrain and the turn shapes.
Sure. Of course. I would say so a J turn, if you think about what a J turn is trying to accomplish, it's showing the ability to turn yourself back uphill almost to a stop. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The beginner zone teaches a student that they can control their speed and control the ability to stop by turning. So I think that I would argue that
Hey, Quinn, I was gonna say I had the same initial reaction to you, but when I stopped to think about the other application some people use it for as a wedge breaking activity to get the inside ski light and use the turn forces to help match the ski.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was like, it could totally be used as an outside ski pressure drill if you in the right context. So like that's where I was like, wait, no, I can actually, I can totally see that one actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
All about it.
So yeah, and I think well said, Brandon, which is my next point, which is every activity will give you the chance to be able to coach to a fundamental in, right? And so, and if anything, that should be a really good thing to know, because if you've got a group of skiers, right? Let's say you've got 6 skiers and 4 of them, or riders, whatever it is, and 4 of them, like the common fundamental, the common thing you need to work on is like really relevant for like 4 of them. And for 2 of them, it's like a little bit something else, right? Then being able to pick an activity, right? Let's say you take wedge turn, you want 4 of them to work on rotation. The other 2, it's outside ski. You can do that, right? once again, it's like you're able to teach the multiple fundamentals within an activity. So point taken and stuff like that, for sure. I think you would get, if you had to name what individual or what highlighted fundamental a J turn would be, I think you would get a strong crew saying rotation. So I just want to say that for formality's sake, but I love it. What about the last group?
Ski snow pressure.
Yeah.
Well, we had some discussions on what that really meant, and pretty much it's anything that had to do with pressure management or what it takes to control what the snow does to the bottom of the ski.
Okay.
And so we could pretty much take any movement pattern, and as long as we had some kind of flexion and extension movements going on, we would be able to deal with a lot of the pressure management thing. The other piece to that is how much edge angle are we going to have? So if we make turns that are a lot more skiddy, we're immediately decreasing the pressure management issues versus more of a carved turn.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, hey, whatever you want to do, if you got lots of flexion and extension and you're controlling your edge angle, you're pretty much managing your pressure with anything you want to do.
Yeah.
Really, really love that last point actually about the edge angle. Absolutely correct.
Absolutely. If I'm maybe assessing a group of students and I want to see where they begin to struggle with pressure, I might say, hey, here's an activity for you. Can you give me 5 open parallel turns, basic parallel turns, really skidded? And then can you give me 5 that are more edgy, right? Because what I'm doing there is I'm not changing the terrain on them, but by changing the amount of edge angle, right, I've changed the pressure that we need to manage, right? So that's a good example of a versatility activity that allows me to see pressure management without maybe having to get them to jump. Maybe I've got a group of skiers that's like, hey, one of them had an injury. One of them's like just not in the mood for jumping. They didn't want to get off the snow, but they don't want, right? But they still want to explore that concept, or they need to, right? What's a way that I can stray from the classic, like, a leaper or anything that gets you jumping and moving off the snow or going into the bumps, to be able to explore pressure management, right? Edging is a great way to do that, right? Because as I get onto a higher edge, right, like and there's less contact with the snow from the rest of the ski, that pressure is going to increase, right? So very cool point.
Yeah, Quinn, I was going to go more basic than that. I mean, if you're dealing with pressure management of any way, shape, or form, if you're going in a straight line, you're primarily dealing with flexion extension in the terrain. The first time you really get the snow pushing against you is as soon as you engage a turn.
Yeah. I love that. Or have you ever taken anyone into the bumps for intro? Sometimes you just have them go traverse across the bumps. They're not turning, they're just going over the bumps, right? Kind of like almost like a little bit of a diagonal traverse. Just get them to be able to feel the snow changing underneath them and needing to make those movements to manage that, right? That's
Tink said leapers in the chat. Yeah, it's an excellent example because you have to be able to flex to be able to leap.
Yep.
At least effectively anyway. And then Brian also said in the chat, which I thought was actually a really interesting activity there, is like skidded funnel turns, but start skidded and then increasing the edge angle as the funnel width decreases. Which would totally be like a wild manipulation of pressure, right? Because like that's an interesting thing. I mean, like this is something I've seen coach to like dev teamers, right? Like I've gone out with Troy Walsh on where like we've worked on manipulating edge angle and like flattening the ski to decrease pressure, because everybody's instinct, especially when we get on steep terrain, is to throw on the brakes, throw up the edge angles at the bottom of the turn to slow down. But what you're really doing is you're increasing pressure at the end of the turn when you want to start decreasing it. And that's like, you want to flatten that ski to release the pressure. And yeah, really cool, dirty, tough stuff right here.
Yeah. Or what's one of the reasons why everyone always says, oh, why you want a flatter ski in the bumps? Well, you want to be able to turn the ski. Yeah, right, for sure. But also, you don't want to add any more pressure than you're already getting from those bumps. right? There's a lot of ways to apply that. I think that's pretty cool. I also think about like hop turns, hop to shape, anything where you're jumping, right? Anything where you're jumping, you're gonna have to
Yeah.
deal with that stuff. So, guys, good job. I hope that everyone here heard some activities that, yeah, maybe you knew but hadn't thought of in that way before. Because I love being able to add tools to my tool bag. Even I heard a couple that I was like, oh, I like that. I think Steve said, showing the bottom of your skis, that kind of thing. I love that little cue. That's a good way to be able to think about getting someone to get their skis to tip over or something like that. So that's awesome. So great. Okay, now once we've got an activity, which we all just talked about, where do we go? Right? Mark unfortunately didn't get into a breakout group. So it was just Mark and I in here for a bit, and then anyone else who had accidentally gotten kicked out. And we were talking a little bit about play and explore. And, play and explore is a big piece of criteria when I'm looking at a good lesson and when I'm trying to teach a good lesson, right? I want to have fun with my groups. We've got an instructor back at Okemo. I don't think Rolf is on here, but Ralph always says, like, when I take a group out, I don't allow anyone to say the word work. We're only going to go out and play. And, I couldn't agree more. You want to be able to play with what you're doing. And as someone who works in psychology, I heard this one definition of play once, and play is literally the opposite of work. It is. We play in order to play. We want to get rid of the efficiencies of an activity just to be able to make it more obstacles so that we have to be challenged, so that we have to be able to do things and explore our skills and explore the performance domain that we're in. So in this case with skiing, right, play and explore should make things a little bit more challenging for us. That's what makes it fun, right? And how we do that in this world is through dirt. Dirt is your best friend, right? It really is your North Star. It's your guide. If I want to play and explore my group, I want to change the dirt of the activity. I don't need to like start with one activity and then move to this whole different activity in my progression. You can. I'm not saying you don't have to, but it's a lot easier to start with an activity and then just change the dirt of it to be able to begin a progression. That is a subjective thing. I will say that's my personal opinion. This is my 2 cents on teaching. So I'm not saying you have to do this as the only way, but I find that this is a really excellent way to progress an activity. It keeps you within the realm you are working in, but what it does is it allows your students to be able to change the skills and the sensations that, and if we backtrack a little bit, right? I was talking about locking in a sensation, right? With that first activity, you want to do that because then you can begin to play around with how you might change that sensation, right? So it's like, oh, maybe you're getting someone to really experience what it's like for the front of the ski to engage top of the turn, right? And you're working on fore aft. It's like, great. I love that for you. Now, can we find a way to figure out where you lose that again or how it changes based on the turn shape, right? What happens when you begin to open up, right? Like, does that sensation change for you at all, right? What happens when you bring it onto some steeper terrain, right? And the intensity increases. Like, do you lose that feeling or can you keep it? And giving your students these pieces of data for themselves is going to give them something to be able to walk away from and work on, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to keep them curious. We want to keep them coming back for more, coming back for a new lesson, right? That's what play and explore can offer. And dirt is going to be your best friend for that. It's all about changing the sensations that you're playing with. So, I remember for my dev team tryout, I had to pull a fundamental out of a bag and then teach to it. And I chose, I pulled out, I didn't get to choose. I randomly pulled out managing ski and snow interaction, regulating magnitude pressure. And we were told that we wanted to have a play and explore focus, right? So I love leapers, so I went to leapers. But then what I wanted to do to progress that was I put it into a funnel so that we can go from um, a leaper pretty much all the way into like hop to short. And then eventually you could bring it all the way down to freaking hop turns. Because a hop turn, if you just start to change the dirt of a hop turn and open it up, it eventually just becomes a leaper and vice versa. And it was like, oh, that's pretty cool, right? Have you ever done like pivot side slips and then gone into the bumps from a pivot side slip, right? Well, how would you integrate that back into bump skiing? You're just going to change the dirt of those movements to eventually make them short turns, short round turns in the bumps, right? Dirt is your best friend, and it really helps students be able to play with the sensations that they're feeling. Another thing to consider here is versatility in terrain. You don't have to always directly change the dirt with your group. If you just put them onto some different terrain, they will be forced to change their dirt, right? So sometimes you can do it indirectly, which I think is really cool. You don't have to give them an actual coaching cue. It's like, hey, wow, we just did short turns for a long time. Let's go to this steeper pitch and try it now there, right? That's changing the dirt, right? That's just seeing what they're going to be able to do. Cool. So it is 8:22. I don't want to keep people here forever, and the breakouts went for a really long time. What I was going to do is go back to breakout rooms, but I'm gonna make an executive decision to skip that for right now. But what I was going to have you all do is go back to your groups and apply dirt to some of the activities that you talked about. But what you can do after this webinar is take some of the activities that you liked, right? And consider, and you can just do this with a paper and pen, right? Write them down and then write a couple of different ways that you can change the dirt of them that creates a different activity, right? That creates a progression for yourself. That's a really cool way to practice teaching a progression naturally without actually having to be out on the hill for yourselves. And one thing that, while you guys were all in your breakout rooms and that Mark and I were talking about, is this need for instructors to be able to just play, you all to play with this knowledge. And you only really get to do that by teaching, but doing something like this is kind of like getting extra mental reps in of teaching, right? How can I take this activity and how would I change the dirt of it to create a new activity or create new sensations? And as you play around with that, you'll find like, oh, wow, my bag of tricks is opening up, and I didn't need to even go to another instructor or go to a clinic to get that tool. I came on it. I came to my own, realization, right? Like I was able to figure that out on my own. And that's when like you begin to separate yourself as a bit of an educator, right? It's like, oh, wow, I really want to go out and ski with Mark now because like, I really like the way that Mark thinks about going from a short turn to a medium turn, right? Or whoever it happens to be. So that's kind of the spiel for tonight. that was our, we're pretty much done, right? I'm going to summarize a little bit with you guys. We had primarily get a really strong understanding of your fundamentals, right? You got to know the technical stuff, live it and breathe it, like know those things. They are always there. Know them, and I'll give you a few ideas to get better at knowing them. Be able to say them in many different ways. One activity I did last year when I was prepping for my dev team tryout is I wrote out all the fundamentals in their formal language, and then I forced myself to write them using completely different words. I couldn't reuse any of the words. And I tried to see how many times I could rewrite them without using any of the same words. It was really hard, but it helped a lot because it helped me really solidify my own understanding of those things because I can put them into language, right? Get a good understanding of the technical fundamentals. And also, by the way, the people skills and the teaching fundamentals too. Know what those are. Those are helpful.
Really quick, Quinn, and just to add to that is like, so a lot of you, for at least from Okemo, probably know I did I did a lot of new hire training as well as level 1 prep for a number of years at Okemo. And one of the cool insights I got from that is in the level 1 prep group, I not only got my new hires, but I got everybody else's. And I got a good chance of seeing like kind of like what stuck and what didn't. And like one of my goals as a new hire instructor was that when you look at instructors, right? There are instructors who they copy other people's activities. There are instructors who modify. So they'll take somebody else's activity and modify it and tweak it a little bit. But then there's instructors who can create, right? They can create their own activities in their own tools for helping their students progress, right? And the difference between people who copy, modify, and create is entirely rooted in how well they know their technical knowledge, right? How much of a foundation they have in that technical knowledge determines whether they are stuck copying what everybody tells them to do versus what they can start being creative because they have that in-depth knowledge and practice using them that allows them to be creative. And so like my focus for a new hire, for example, was how quickly can I get them to that create stage and how can I lay that good technical foundation? Because to me, that is the foundation of being a creative instructor. It's ironically the technical stuff, which sounds not very creative and rudimentary, but it's when you know that technical stuff, that's how you can be a more creative instructor. Anyway, ran over. Go ahead, Quinn.
Oh, you're good. Yeah. What I add to that is once again, going back to that Carl Jung quote, right? That's the point of that is if you know the principles really well, the methods are there for the choosing. There's millions of methods, right? And there should be, because guess what? There are millions of people out there. There are billions, right? You're going to have all these different students. And if you want to individualize, the way you teach that principle to them should be totally new each time in a way, right? In principle, it should be totally new. And so, because everyone learns differently. So,
And I think it naturally happens when you meet these different people and your dynamics with those people, and you kind of sense how they learn, and then that just forces you to kind of change your approach.
Yeah, well, so it's definitely right. It's about that's why when I go into a lesson with no plan, I'm not worried because I know that my students are going to help me. Right? I know you guys are going to give me the information on how I'm going to teach you. What I need to make sure is that I give you all the opportunity to tell me, right? I'm going to make sure that I'm teaching to a visual learner, an auditory learner, a kinesthetic learner, right? That I'm making sure I talk to every single one of you and figure out what your goals are that day. And if you have any little concerns, or if you have something specifically you would really like to get into, I'm going to make sure that I know what the snow is like. I'm going to make sure that my students know what the snow is like, what the conditions are like. Because when we explore all that together, right, once again, the activity practically picks itself. The method, in a way, picks itself, you know? And what I would add to what Brandon just said there, too, about creativity, right, play and explore, is I had someone tell me this once, is that you only play, actually, Carl Jung told me this when I was, right, back to Carl Jung. People, when you love, like when you really love something, you can know you love it a lot because we as humans like to play with the things that we love, right? It's a really good indicator of your curiosity of something. And skiing, we're all here probably, or whatever your discipline is, because you love snow sports. And so as a teacher, when you go out there, like, let that be contagious for your students. Show your love for that sport. That's going to help create a playful environment and promote creativity, because that's creativity is it runs along the what am I trying to say? Creativity it comes out when you're showing some form of love for what it is you're doing, right? If you watch like a great chef cook, right? They always joke around that like, what's the secret ingredient? Well, it's a little bit of love, right? It's because they're enjoying what they're creating, right? When you see a really good craftsman build a table or a chair or whatever it is, it's an appreciation for their craft, right? So make sure that when you go out and you teach, show your love for skiing. It's gonna hook a lot of people right? It's an easy win. It's low hanging fruit. Okay, so strong fundamentals, right? Know your fundamentals. Plan around the fundamental, not the method, right? So if you're trying to think about what to do already, you're focusing too hard on like what the method is. No. Think about what the fundamental is and then go from there, right? Fundamental first. It's going to help identify the movements you want to coach and teach, right? Because like I said, those fundamentals, they've got a ski performance thing and they've got a body movement thing. So if you know what fundamental you want to teach, it's going to tell you the body movements that are involved in that. And it's like, okay, well, how can I coach to those body movements? What's the method, right? What do I want to do? Collaborate with your students to explore movements. That should probably be a takeaway from this, right? Because you need their information, you need their data to know where to go. You need it. As a coach, your best friend is data. And that's why I kind of alluded to this already, right? Like my first job when I get out there on the hill is I need to learn as much as I can about you, not about what I'm going to do with all of you. That will be easy, right? Figuring out the right answer, you need to have the right questions. And so I'm going to ask as many questions as I can. I'm going to get as much data as I can from my students. And that's going to eventually lead me to the right answer. And then play with the sensation, right? How do we progress a sensation? How do we mess around with it? Dirt. Right? Did I write that in? I didn't write that in, but dirt. That's our friend. So that's my webinar. That's my tech talk today.